What if a god fell into hell, not just any god, but one born of light, raised to believe in truth, justice, and the infinite potential of humanity? What if that God opened his eyes not to the golden fields of Kansas, but to the choking ash of a dying galaxy? What if Superman, the last son of Krypton, Crash, landed in the universe of Warhammer 40K? That is the question that will guide us through this story, a journey across a galaxy ruled by faith, fear, and endless war. A place where hope is not a virtue, but a heresy, where the very word hero has been twisted into something unrecognizable. In this grimdark universe, there are no clean hands, no shining symbols, no red-caped saviors. There is only the Emperor, half man, half God, and a billion souls dying each day in his name. But what happens when another godlike being enters this eternal nightmare? One who believes, against all odds, that mercy still matters. Stay till the end of this story, because what unfolds will change the very foundations of the Imperium, and the fate of Superman himself. By the time we reach the end, you'll understand why even the might of Krypton could tremble before the madness of the warp. So, let's begin high above the charred surface of a forgotten world. The stars split open. A burning light cuts through the void, not a comet, not a weapon, but a vessel hurtling across dimensions, trailing flame and energy no human sensor can comprehend. It crashes through the atmosphere, shaking mountains and shattering stone, before embedding itself deep within a field of black glass. From the smoking crater rises a figure, scarred, confused, his eyes glowing faintly red beneath a sky that knows no mercy. Superman has arrived in the 41st millennium, but this is not the galaxy he once knew. His super hearing does not find the heartbeat of a peaceful Earth. Instead, it drowns in the screams of a trillion souls. His vision cuts through layers of despair, hive cities burning, orcs rampaging, chaos gods whispering from the warp. And as he kneels amidst the ashes, a single thought pierces through the chaos in his mind. What happened to humanity? They came for him within hours. Not soldiers, zealots. The first humans Superman would see in this new universe were not farmers or scientists, but warriors clad in black carapace armor, bearing the sigil of the Inquisition. Their voices, amplified through vox beakers, echoed across the wasteland as they surrounded the crater. By order of the Holy Inquisition, identify yourself, Xenos or heretic, before we burn this ground to cinders. Superman rose slowly, his cape torn and scorched, his boots sinking into molten glass. His eyes, calm, searching, human, met their helmets. He raised his hands in peace. "I mean you no harm," he said, his voice resonating like thunder across the plain. But before he could finish, bolter fire screamed through the air. Explosive rounds detonated against his chest, shrouding him in flame and dust. When the smoke cleared, he was still standing untouched. To the Inquisition, it was proof of heresy. To Superman, it was the first sign of what this galaxy had become. He could have stopped them in an instant, disarmed them, crushed their weapons, silenced the fire. But he didn't. He'd come in peace, and peace was something he still believed in. With a sigh, he rose into the air, the ground cracking beneath him, and spoke once more, softer this time. "Please, I don't want to fight you." The Inquisitors fell to their knees, some in awe, others in fear. They saw not a man, but a god descending from the heavens. Their reports would spread across the void within days. A being of impossible strength, a heretic from the stars, a potential demon, and so began the legend of the god from the sky. Word reached Terra swiftly, carried through the secret networks of the Ordo Xenos and Ordo Malleus. A Kryptonian had entered the Emperor's realm, and that alone was enough to shake the faith of men. Some said he was a lost Primarch returned. Others whispered he was the Emperor reborn. A few, the wisest, the most terrified, suspected something far worse. In the darkness of his ruined craft, Superman stared out at a horizon lit by war and wondered what kind of universe needed saving this badly. His senses reached across continents, hearing entire populations chanting the Emperor's name, feeling the vibration of orbital bombardments, the distant pulse of the Imperium like a storm pressing against reality. He had faced gods before. He had fought tyrants, devils, monsters, but never a galaxy this broken. And when the skies tore open again, when the first Chaos War, Prift screamed to life nearby, he realized he was not alone. Something in the warp had felt him arrive. Something ancient, hungry, curious. The galaxy had noticed its newest god, and it would not let him rest. The Inquisition moved swiftly. Within days, the being from the sky was captured, or rather, escorted, to Terra under the highest security humanity could muster. Not because they had the power to contain him, but because even the attempt made them feel less afraid. The great ships of the Ordo Malleus surrounded him like ants around a flame. Every weapon trained, every prayer whispered. Superman allowed it. He didn't resist. He could have torn through adamantium bulkheads, escaped into the void, or dismantled an entire fleet with his bare hands. But he didn't. Something about this place, this crumbling empire built on faith and fear, demanded understanding. When the black ships descended upon holy Terra, the crowds gathered in silence. Millions of pilgrims fell to their knees, their tear-streaked faces lit by the fire of their candles. Above them, a single figure descended bathed in light, cloaked in red and blue. To them, he was a miracle. To the ecclesiarchy, he was a threat. Superman was led through the halls of the Imperial Palace, where ancient stone met the cold precision of machinery. Every wall was alive with the hum of power, every corner watched by statues of angels and skulls. And in the center of that sacred labyrinth, beneath banners that had not moved in 10,000 years, he felt it, the Emperor's presence. It wasn't a voice, not exactly. It was a pressure, a weight on his mind, like gravity given thought. The astronomican's psychic blaze brushed against him, recognizing something familiar and foreign. For a single heartbeat, Superman saw visions. Worlds burning, armies kneeling, a throne of golden decay, and at its center, a man, ancient beyond comprehension, neither living nor dead. The Emperor of mankind. Superman dropped to one knee, not out of submission, but respect. "I can feel you," he whispered. "You're holding this galaxy together, aren't you? But at what cost?" No words came, but the psychic current swelled. In that instant, Superman understood fragments of what had been lost, what the Imperium had become. It wasn't just an empire. It was a prison made of devotion, with the Emperor as both warden and captive. And then, pain, a psychic probe, sharp as a blade, cut into his mind. The Inquisitors wanted answers. Who was he? What power fueled him? Was he a god, a demon, or something worse? Superman didn't retaliate. Instead, he let them see. His memories unfolded before them. Krypton's destruction, Earth's wars, his endless battle for hope. The Inquisitors recoiled, their minds scorched by the sheer purity of his intent. You truly believe in humanity?" One of them stammered, unable to comprehend it. "Always," Superman replied, "even when they fall." The chamber fell silent. For the first time in millennia, those who served the Emperor saw something they couldn't name. It wasn't faith born of fear. It wasn't obedience. It was hope. But hope was dangerous. Outside the palace, the rumors spread faster than the Inquisition could contain them. A man of light had come, a being who did not worship the emperor, but honored humanity itself. The people whispered new prayers, not to the throne, but to the God from the sky. And deep within the warp, the dark gods laughed, for they too had felt his light, and they hungered for it. The warp is alive. It breathes, it hungers, and it whispers. When Superman left the Imperial Palace, the echoes of that psychic encounter followed him like shadows. He had felt the Emperor's presence vast, cold, half dead, but now he felt something else, something older, something watching him. At first, it was faint, a whisper brushing the edge of his thoughts as he soared over a hive world's smog-choked skyline. A whisper that called him not by name, but by truth. Kal-El, last son of light, do you not see what they have done to your precious humanity? He tried to ignore it, tried to focus on what he could fix. In the slums below, the Imperium's citizens clawed for scraps beneath the gaze of the Arbites. Children starved in the alleys, while preachers screamed sermons of guilt and submission. Factories churned endlessly, each spark of life consumed by the machine of faith. Superman descended among them like a miracle. He lifted the broken. He stopped a riot with a word. For the first time in centuries, those people saw a man who did not demand their worship, but their will to live. And that's when the warp truly took notice. The air shimmered, reality thinned, the shadows deepened into impossible shapes, and from them emerged voices, layered atop one another like 1,000 serpents whispering the same thought. You could save them all, Kal-El. You could remake this galaxy. You could be their true god. He spun around, his eyes flaring crimson. Show yourself. The laughter that followed wasn't sound. It was sensation, the kind that crawls under the skin. From the haze formed images, 4 silhouettes of unfathomable grandeur. Khorne, the lord of endless battle, roared his challenge. Nurgle, father of rot, welcomed him with decaying arms. Slaanesh, the whisper of temptation, smiled with a beauty too perfect to be human. And Tease, Inch, architect of all fate, spoke last, his voice a storm of futures. You seek to save them, but they cannot be saved, not without you becoming what you despise. Superman's fists clenched. I don't want power, I want peace. Then you will fail, Tease, Inch replied, his tone like a knife dipped in honey. Because peace in this galaxy is a lie. You cannot heal rot without cutting flesh. You cannot build without blood. You cannot save without ruling. And then, the warp revealed its final illusion, a vision of an Imperium reborn. Under his leadership, the people were free. The stars thrived. The Emperor's corpse was gone, replaced by a living, breathing ideal of justice. But in this world, the sigil on every banner wasn't the Aquila. It was the S of Krypton. The image shattered as Superman screamed, firing his heat vision through the warp apparition until the ground itself turned to slag. The whispers vanished, leaving only silence, and the faint echo of mocking laughter fading into the void. He fell to one knee, trembling. The vision had shown him something he feared more than any enemy, himself as a tyrant. But far away, in the eye of terror, the Chaos Gods did not mourn their failure. They had seen the doubt flicker in his heart. That was enough, the tiniest seed of fear, of pride, of despair, planted deep in the man who once thought himself incorruptible. And in this universe, even a god could fall. It began as a whisper, a story told in the dark corners of hive cities, in the silence between prayers to the Emperor. A rumor that somewhere, beyond the reach of the ecclesiarchy's watchful eye, a new god walked among men, one who listened, one who cared. They called him many names, the Lightbringer, the Redeemer, the true Son of Man. But among the desperate and the forgotten, He was simply Kal. Superman hadn't meant to start a movement. He only wanted to help, to give the broken fragments of humanity some small spark of hope. He rebuilt shattered villages on war-torn worlds, stopped planetary bombardments with his own hands, and cured plagues that the Mechanicus deemed necessary purges. Every act of mercy was seen as a miracle. Every life saved was an act of rebellion. To the ecclesiarchy, it was heresy. To the Inquisition, it was contagion. To the people, it was salvation. And so, the cults began. In the catacombs of Necromunda, miners carved the symbol of the Kryptonian crest into the walls, not knowing its meaning, only that it stood for something beyond fear. In the shrines of Cadia's remnants, preachers whispered forbidden prayers, not to the emperor upon his throne, but to the man of light who walked the stars. When the Inquisition discovered the first of these worshippers, they burned entire sectors clean. Millions died in flame, screaming Superman's name as they perished. But even death could not kill the idea. Superman watched in horror. He never wanted to be worshipped. The moment he saw his symbol painted across banners of rebellion, he knew the damage had been done. His hope, his compassion, had been twisted into a weapon. He confronted them. He begged them to stop. "Don't fight in my name," he pleaded. "Don't kill for me. I am not your God." But faith, once born, is not so easily slain. To the faithful, even his denial became a prophecy. "The God of light rejects the throne," they whispered. "He walks among us because he is one of us." And the Imperium panicked. The High Lords convened emergency councils. The Ecclesiarch declared the Kryptonian a false prophet, and the Inquisition issued a galaxy-wide decree, Exterminatus Protocol 1017, the Kryptonian heresy. Entire worlds were purged to erase his influence. Vox transmissions were censored, records erased. Even the Space Marines were divided. Some, like the Ultramarines, believed this being might be a lost Primarch returned. Others saw him as a chaos deception. But a few, a very few, felt something in his presence that reminded them of what they had once been, heroes. And so, fractures began to form. A galaxy built on obedience now trembled beneath the weight of one man's compassion. Superman had not sought power, yet he had become the most dangerous thing in the Imperium's eyes, an idea. And in the dark, the Chaos Gods laughed louder than ever, for even without corruption, the Man of Light had achieved their work for them. The Imperium was tearing itself apart. But still, Superman refused to surrender. The order came from the highest chamber of Terra, transmitted through psychic relay and sealed by sigil. The Lightbringer must be silenced. No debate. No hesitation. The decision was final. The Adeptus Custodes, the Emperor's personal guard, warriors crafted in his image, were unleashed. These were not Space Marines. They were older, purer, closer to godhood. Clad in auramite, their armor glowed like captured suns, their blades forged to pierce even demon flesh. For 10,000 years, they had stood watch over the golden throne. Now, they would hunt the man who dared challenge its light. They found him on the outer rim of Segmentum Solar, standing atop the ruins of a hive world that had refused to bow to the Inquisition's purge. Superman had saved them, shielding entire cities from orbital fire with his bare hands. To him, it was mercy. To them, it was treason. When the Custodes arrived, the sky burned gold. The people fell to their knees, thinking the Emperor himself had descended. And for a moment, even Superman felt the weight of that illusion. The Custodes radiated divine power, discipline, and purpose. The leader stepped forward, his voice calm, almost gentle. "Kryptonian, you have done great deeds. You have inspired many, but you have broken the balance of faith. You must submit to judgment." Superman stood his ground. His cape hung in tatters, his eyes reflecting the golden light of the custodian guard. "If judgment means letting innocent people die," he said, "then no, I won't kneel." The custodian inclined his head, sorrow in his tone. "Then may the throne forgive what must be done." The first strike came faster than lightning. Superman caught the Guardian's spear mid-thrust, the impact cracking the air like thunder. Then came the other's blades slicing, halberds flashing, psychic might unleashed. The ground shattered beneath their battle. Mountains turned to dust, oceans vaporized from the sheer force. For hours, they clashed divine will against indestructible hope. Superman held back as long as he could, refusing to kill. But even restraint could not save him from the fury of the Custodes. Their weapons cut deeper than steel, they were forged from faith, from the Emperor's own psychic resonance. Each strike burned his skin like holy fire, yet he did not fall. Bleeding, weary, his suit torn to shreds, Superman rose above the clouds. "I don't want to fight you," he said, voice trembling with exhaustion. "You're protecting something sacred, but look at what that sacred thing has become." For the first time, the Custodes hesitated. Behind their emotionless masks, even they could feel the truth in his words. But duty was absolute. A single voice answered, "We do not question, we serve." Superman's eyes glowed, not with rage, but sorrow. "Then you served the wrong god." The heavens ignited. The clash that followed would be remembered for centuries as the Battle of Saul's Shadow. Entire systems witnessed the light-blinding flashes that seared through the warp. When it ended, nothing remained but silence and ash. Superman floated above the ruins, his body scorched, his heart heavy. Around him drifted the shattered remnants of Oramite armor, golden fragments glowing faintly in the void. He had not killed them. They had chosen to die for their emperor. He closed his eyes. "You deserved better." And somewhere, deep in the psychic realm, the emperor's shadow stirred. For the first time in millennia, something like curiosity flickered across the immortal's fading mind. The Kryptonian still lived, and his presence was unraveling the fabric of the Imperium itself. For 10,000 years, the Emperor had dreamed in silence. His mortal body, decayed and bound to the golden throne, had long since ceased to move. But his mind, his will, still stretched across the galaxy, holding reality together by sheer force of purpose. And now that stillness quivered. The Custodes had failed. The heresy of the Kryptonian had not been extinguished. Worse, his light was spreading, psychic disturbances flared wherever his presence lingered. Billions whispered his name, and each prayer, each act of hope, tore small fractures in the veil of the warp. The Emperor had watched silently as empires rose and fell. But this man was different, not chaos, born, not of Terra, something alien, something pure. And so, deep within the palace, the Emperor reached out. Across the warp, through storms of madness and fire, a voice echoed a sound not of words, but of memory. Superman felt it as he drifted between the stars, healing, reflecting, questioning everything he had seen. It wasn't sound, it was a pull, a gravity older than time. He followed it. Through the choking psychic tides, through the ghosts of a billion lost souls, until he stood not in body, but in spirit before the blinding light of the golden throne. The Emperor's psychic form towered above him, vast as a sun, burning with divine agony. Yet in that impossible brilliance, Superman could see the man beneath, the weary father who had sacrificed everything for a dream that had rotted in his absence. For a moment, neither spoke. They knew each other before a word was said. Then the Emperor's voice filled the void, ancient and immense. "You are not of this galaxy. Your power tears at the seams of what remains. Why are you here, stranger of light?" Superman's voice was quiet but unyielding. Because your people have forgotten what it means to live. They worship a corpse while the stars burn around them. They fear hope more than death. The Emperor's light flickered, not in anger, but in something dangerously close to sorrow. I gave them purpose. Without faith, they would have fallen long ago. Faith without compassion isn't strength. Superman replied, it's chains. The psychic winds howled. Visions surged between them, the birth of humanity, the Great Crusade, the Horus Heresy, the endless war. Superman saw it all. The Emperor's triumphs, his failures, his loneliness. And in return, the Emperor saw Krypton's death, Earth's rebirth, and the man who refused to surrender to despair. Then the Emperor spoke again, softer now. You still believe they can be saved. Superman's eyes shone with faint light. Always, the throne crackled. The psychic storm raged harder. The warp itself recoiled from the clash of two wills so bright that demons screamed in terror. And for a heartbeat, just one, the Emperor's golden eyes dimmed. He saw a future he had long forgotten possible. A galaxy without tyranny, without fear. But then the light surged again, stronger, harsher. You will undo everything I have built. He thundered. Without order, there will be only chaos. Superman's voice broke like thunder. Then maybe it's time someone showed them another way. The psychic connection shattered. Across Terra, the Astronomicon flared like a dying star. Astropaths screamed as blinding light consumed their visions. For an instant, the Emperor's beacon, the light that guided all Imperial ships through the warp, flickered, and the galaxy trembled. When Superman awoke, he was back in orbit, the stars cold and silent around him. He could still feel the echo of that vast presence, neither ally nor enemy, but something older than both. He had challenged a god, and the god had listened. But now, every inquisitor, every chapter, every loyal world knew the truth. The Kryptonian heretic had reached the throne itself. The Emperor had noticed him, and the Imperium would never be the same again. It began on one world, and then spread like wildfire across the stars. The first planet to fall was Helios Prime, a forge world ruled by the iron hand of the Adeptus Mechanicus. When its overseers demanded the population double their output for the next crusade, the miners refused. They didn't raise banners of chaos. They didn't invoke the Emperor. They simply lifted their heads to the skies and whispered one name, Kal-El. When the Inquisition came to make an example of them, Superman was already there. He stood between the executioners and the people, his cape burned to ash, his eyes calm. They've suffered enough, he said, and with that, the old order cracked. News of the miracle at Helios spread through the Imperium's Vox networks before censors could react. Within weeks, rebellions erupted across hundreds of worlds. Entire regiments of the Astra Militarum laid down their arms, choosing to protect civilians rather than slaughter them. The Adeptus Arbites lost control of hive cities. The Ecclesiarchy's cathedrals burned. The Kryptonian heresy was no longer a whisper, it was a revolution. And Superman, the man who had never sought a throne, became its reluctant symbol. He pleaded for peace. He begged the uprisings to stop. But to those who had known nothing but oppression and darkness, his words were like divine fire. The Lightbringer, they called him, the God who walks. To them, he wasn't a man, he was proof that even in the 41st millennium, justice could still be real. The Imperium responded the only way it knew how, with fire. 1,000 war fleets were mobilized. Planetary bombardments turned rebellious worlds to cinders. The Inquisition declared exterminatus Kryptonum, the systematic eradication of any system touched by his influence. The galaxy burned in the name of purity, and through it all, Superman fought not to rule, but to save. He tore apart ships before they could glass innocent cities. He deflected orbital strikes with his own body. He flew from one war front to another, a streak of red and blue cutting through the endless black. But every victory came with a price. For every life he saved, 10 more were lost in retaliation. For every world he liberated, another was annihilated. His hope was becoming fuel for slaughter. At last, even those closest to him, the ones who had followed his example, began to change. The cults that had once worshipped him as savior now demanded vengeance. They executed priests. They bombed ecclesiarchy ships. They no longer wanted salvation, they wanted revenge. Superman stood in the ruins of a cathedral, staring at the symbol of the Aquila, shattered, half, buried in ash. His hands trembled. "This isn't what I wanted," he whispered. "I tried to save them, and now they're killing each other in my name." The warp rippled in amusement. The dark gods watched with delight, savoring every drop of doubt that dripped from his soul. But amid the chaos, something else stirred, an echo of humanity not born from worship or fear, but understanding. A handful of scholars, soldiers, and psychers began to gather, not as zealots, but as believers in the idea behind him. They called themselves the Dawnwatch. Their creed was simple: hope without chains. They were small, fragile, hunted, but they were real. For the first time in millennia, a movement arose that sought neither domination nor destruction, only compassion. And that was when the Imperium decided to end it all. From Terra itself, the order was given, the launch of the divine retribution, a weapon older than most stars, a relic from the dark age of technology, hidden even from the Mechanicus, capable of annihilating an entire sector in one strike. Its target, Superman, across the galaxy, as his followers fought and died, the weapon charged. The Emperor's servants declared it holy vengeance. The Ecclesiarch proclaimed, "Let the false god be consumed in his own light." But on a silent world orbiting a dying sun, Superman knelt beside the body of a fallen child, one who had once believed in him, and whispered to the void, "If this is hope, then maybe I've failed." And at that moment, high above, the divine retribution fired. A beam of pure annihilation split the heavens, and the light of the last sun of Krypton vanished. For days, the galaxy was blind. The divine retribution had fired once, just once, and the aftermath of that single act of violence echoed across 1,000 systems. Vox networks went silent, warp travel faltered, astropaths screamed in agony before their minds went dark. The light that had once guided ships through the immaterium flickered, dimmed, and then guttered out. They said the weapon had struck its mark. They said the heretic had been obliterated so completely that even his atoms had been purified by holy fire. The ecclesiarchy rejoiced. The High Lords declared victory. Across the Imperium, the burning of Superman's effigies was proclaimed a sacred rite. The false god is undone, they chanted, and his light extinguished. But deep in the warp, something moved. It began as a ripple, faint, pure, alien, not of chaos, but of something the warp had long forgotten: hope. The demons felt it first. They recoiled from it, shrieking in confusion as the light expanded. The ruinous powers turned their gaze toward it, suspicious, enraged. How could anything of order, of good, still exist in their domain? And yet it grew. Fragments of memory floated through the warp's currents. The sound of a heartbeat, the flash of a smile, the warmth of a dying sun. And from those fragments, from faith not built on fear but on belief, something began to take shape. Superman was not dead, at least not in the way death existed in that galaxy. His body was gone, scattered to cosmic dust. But his will, That indestructible drive to protect, to uplift, to believe had bled into the Imperium itself. Every act of kindness inspired by his example had left an echo. Every life he'd saved was a spark. Every prayer whispered not in fear, but in love added fuel. And together, those sparks formed light. A new presence began to coalesce within the warp, neither demon nor god, but something entirely unprecedented. A psychic resonance that the Emperor himself felt from his throne. A warmth that cut through the suffocating gloom of his endless existence. For the first time in 10,000 years, the Emperor felt something he had forgotten. Hope. The Astronomicon flared back to life. Not the harsh, burning beacon of domination it once was, but a gentler, clearer glow. Ships lost in the warp found their paths again. Astropaths who had gone blind suddenly wept as they saw visions of light piercing the madness, and the people whispered, "He returns." At first, the Inquisition tried to suppress it. They burned the Dawn Watch, they silenced every mention of the name, but the more they denied it, the more the phenomenon spread. The faithful of the Kryptonian heresy no longer spoke of rebellion or blood. They simply looked to the stars and waited. In the eye of terror, the dark gods gathered. The laughter that had once filled eternity was gone. Something unnatural to them, something incorruptible, was taking root in their domain. "He defies the nature of the warp," Tis Inch hissed. "He cannot be destroyed," Korn growled. "He is love," whispered Slaanesh, half in awe, half in loathing. And in the heart of that storm, a shape began to emerge. A man, not golden, not monstrous, but cloaked in a tattered red cape that fluttered against the impossible winds of the Imperium. His eyes burned not with rage, but with light. The warp itself trembled. Superman was becoming something more. Not a god by choice, but by consequence. A counterweight to chaos itself, a beacon of will, a symbol that could not be erased, not even by the fire of a billion suns. Across the galaxy, dreams changed. Soldiers on dying worlds saw visions of him standing beneath alien skies, hand extended. Civilians in hive cities awoke weeping, feeling warmth they couldn't explain. Even psychers, once tormented by the warp's voices, heard something new whispering through the void, "Get up, you can still do good." And far on Terra, the Emperor stirred once more. His empty eyes flickered with light, not divine flame, but reflection. He whispered into the void, barely audible even to the most sensitive psychers, "Kryptonian, what are you becoming?" And from beyond the veil, a voice, gentle, human, unbroken, answered, "What you always hoped humanity could be." The light in the warp flared brighter. The galaxy shifted. Something had begun that not even the Emperor could stop. The warp seethed. For millennia, it had been a realm of madness, an ocean of pure thought, fed by despair, rage, and desire. But now, something else spread across its tides, slow and steady as dawn over an endless battlefield. Hope, not the naive kind, not the fragile spark easily snuffed by fear, but a radiant, unyielding presence born from the unbreakable will of a single soul. It was not divine, it was human, and it was rewriting the nature of the Imperium itself. Superman had become more than matter, more than flesh. He was thought, memory, intention, and idea weaponized against the very physics of evil. Where demons howled, his light made them dissolve. Where chaos whispered, his voice cut through, "You are better than this." Planets that once reeked of corruption began to feel different. Priests found their sermons faltering as the Emperor's name was replaced by another, spoken softly, reverently, without fear. Not worship, but remembrance. On Terra, the High Lords panicked. Their power was built on control, on the certainty that humanity could not survive without obedience. But now, Even the Adeptus Custodes whispered among themselves. For the first time since their creation, they felt doubt. And far above the world they guarded, the Emperor stirred again. His psychic radiance had stabilized, strengthened even, but its nature had changed. He could feel the Kryptonian's influence winding through the warp like a counter current to chaos. It was impossible, and yet it was. He knew what it meant. His dominion was ending. Humanity had found another light. The Emperor reached out again, his mind spanning the void. Kal-El, his voice thundered through the Imperium, shaking stars. You threaten everything I have built. You would tear down the walls that keep the warp from consuming mankind. The answer came like calm sunlight through the storm. No, I'm tearing down the walls that keep mankind from living. The warp shuddered. Around them, galaxies folded and unfolded like petals in a storm of light. The two wills, ancient and eternal, collided again. But this time, it was not fury that met fury. It was conviction that met control. The Emperor showed him visions of chaos unleashed. Demons feasting on worlds, humanity screaming without the Astronomicon to guide it. Superman showed him the same worlds, but freed, people helping each other, building, choosing kindness without command. For an instant, the Emperor saw both futures and faltered. He had wanted that once, long ago, before the heresy, before the throne, before the weight of immortality. He had wanted them to stand on their own. He had forgotten that dream. Superman had not. The Emperor's psychic voice softened, the faintest trace of something human breaking through the godlike facade. And if they fail, Superman's reply was steady, almost tender, then they get back up, like they always do. Silence filled the warp. The light of the Astronomicon dimmed, then flared brighter than it ever had before, not as a weapon, but as a beacon. On 1,000 worlds, the people looked up and saw a new dawn breaking. The warp storms that had raged for centuries began to calm. Demons retreated, hissing, as the Imperium itself bent under the weight of something it had never known balance. The Emperor's vast form stood unmoving upon the throne, but his eyes, those ancient, lifeless orbs, flickered one last time. A whisper rippled through the minds of every psyker alive, then show them the way. And then the throne went still. The Astronomicon faded not in darkness, but in release. Across the galaxy, ships drifted free of psychic currents, yet somehow found their way by instinct, by will, by choice. The age of the Emperor had ended. In its place, the light of a new dawn rose from the warp, a presence that guided not by command, but by inspiration. It did not demand prayer. It did not punish failure. It only whispered when needed, "You can still do good." And in the depths of the Imperium, where the storm once reigned, a lone figure hovered in a sea of calm light. His cape drifted around him like a flame. His eyes glowed with the warmth of every life he'd touched. He smiled, faintly, "They'll be all right." And with that, the last son of Krypton turned his gaze to the endless stars, his stars now, and vanished into the light he had created. The galaxy was silent for a long time. Then, slowly, surely, the people began to rebuild, not in the name of gods, but in the name of one enduring truth. Hope is stronger than fear.